Week 1 of OTAs is officially in the books. We'll talk about which players stood out the most. We'll also talk about some salary cap updates, some roster updates, and some stadium updates. All that and more in this episode of the Flock Rundown.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. We'll start with some updates first, and then we'll get into the OTAs highlights. But the first update is we got an official salary cap number at where we stand today. Brian McFarland at Ravens Salary Cap posted that we officially have $12 million in salary cap. That includes Derrick Henry's restructure and extension, Malachi Starks signing, the Tyus Bowser grievance withdrawal. It includes everything up to this point besides the John Jenkins signing, because we still have to wait until after June 1st to officially bring him onto the roster, because that's when Michael Pierce's retirement becomes official. So $12 million in salary cap is the most up-to-date number that we could possibly have right now. The only outstanding move is that John Jenkins signing, which will happen in the next week after June 1st. And I'm sure that's for the vet minimum just due to his age and expected role on this team. So the Ravens, to have as stacked of a roster as they do, to still have $12 million in cap space is actually a really good position. Now, I know that they added a bunch of void years onto Ronnie's deal, and they restructured Marlon's deal and added void years, and they've been very aggressive with adding a lot of these void years to keep this salary cap flexibility. But if the Ravens wanted to go make another move or continue to sign vets throughout the offseason as people get cut closer to the regular season and whatnot, they definitely can go do that. They definitely can go sign a Jadeveon Clowney. They definitely can go make another move and still have room to clear up salary cap room. You know, there could be a Lamar Jackson extension, Roquan Smith restructure. There's still some contracts out there that haven't been touched yet. And I think that the Ravens are in a very comfortable position to ride the roster out as is if they want. Add a few cheap veteran pieces, which I expect that they still will do. Maybe at safety, maybe a Jadeveon Clowney, whatever they see fit. There's plenty of money there to go make those types of moves throughout the rest of the offseason. I also think there's enough money there to get really, really aggressive if that's the move that they want to go do. You know, I've seen a lot of Jalen Ramsey talk or things like that. If the Ravens really wanted to clear more cap room, get extra aggressive with the void years and make a move like that, I don't suspect that's going to happen, by the way, but it is possible. Sitting at $12 million right now with money to be cleared still, it is possible that they can go make whatever move they want. They can get as aggressive as they want to. If I had to guess, and just based off past experience, I think the Ravens will, keep this salary cap room and probably just sign a couple cheap vets. And that also gives them flexibility throughout the season for extensions or to go make another move if they need to in the season. Let's say there's injuries at a certain position and they got to get aggressive. Having $12 million in free cap space to kind of maneuver is always kind of a luxurious position to be in. So regardless, the Ravens are in a pretty good spot for how stacked this roster is. The Ravens have also been doing a ton of stadium upgrades. The Ravens already have one of the best stadium experiences in the NFL, in my opinion, but they are definitely doubling down on that and trying to consistently improve. Cordell Woodland tweeted that SVP of Marketing Brad Downs was asked if there was ever a potential for a retractable roof at M&T Bank Stadium, making the Ravens a dome team, and he said, "This is the AFC North. We play football outside." I do think the AFC North should stay outside, including Baltimore. I think that actually is an edge when you're consistently playing in those harsh conditions, and then a dome team, like the Lions or somebody comes and has to play you in the cold. I feel like we always have that advantage. Not hating on the Lions. They're a great team. I'm just saying I've noticed them killing it in the dome week after week, and then they come to a place like Baltimore and they're not the same offense. So I think that there's an edge there too, even though our offense might struggle a little bit more too, but we got a dominant run game with Derrick Henry. So the colder it gets, and Lamar Jackson if needed. So the colder it gets, we can continue to just pound the rock. I think it's an advantage, and it doesn't seem like Baltimore is going to have a dome anytime soon. I do think that hurts their Super Bowl chances. I've seen them saying that they want to host a Super Bowl, they want to host the draft. I definitely think they'll host the draft. That's definitely coming in the next 5 years, I'd say. But a Super Bowl most likely is not headed to a cold destination unless it's in a dome. You know, we saw the Super Bowl years ago, played in New York, and it just wasn't the greatest conditions. It wasn't the greatest game, and I think that they want the Super Bowl to be a clean game, either played in warm weather or in a dome. So I do think the Ravens not having a dome, they're probably not going to host a Super Bowl. I could be wrong. That would be awesome if they do. And especially if we're in it, home game would be just absolutely insane. But I don't see the Ravens hosting a Super Bowl without a dome. I do see them hosting the draft. And I am excited about all their stadium upgrades that they consistently provide. They're definitely trying to make this one of the best stadiums in the league. Now let's jump back into OTAs. I made multiple videos about the OTAs throughout the week, but I want to just kind of recap this week and just give some brief thoughts on some main guys that really stood out. We'll start with Nate Wiggins. He put on some weight this offseason, and he's still flying around out there. He is expected to be the Ravens' #1 outside corner. Obviously, we have Marlon Humphrey, who, you know, you could technically say might be our best corner, but he's aging and plays inside. They have very different responsibilities. I think Nate Wiggins is going to be the Ravens' #1 outside corner. He's going to line up on those top receivers when they're outside, and I'm expecting huge things from Nate Wiggins. He was an absolute hit last year, and the only knock was his weight, his light frame, but he played with a lighter frame throughout last season and still was hitting, still was playing like a Raven, and I think that with some weight that he put on this offseason and just aging and growing into his body, I think that Nate Wiggins is only going to continue to get better and better. Sticking with corner, TJ Tampa was flashing a little bit this week because he was getting a lot more opportunity. Awuzie was sick. He was there early in OTAs, but then he was sick and missed the open practice, but TJ Tampa was out there getting that run. I think that TJ Tampa and Awuzie are competing for that opposite outside corner position. I do think Awuzie, with all his NFL experience, is going to be the starter, at least right now as it stands, but that doesn't mean TJ Tampa's role isn't going to expand. He has a ton of potential, and I think the Ravens are definitely excited about what they got and are relying on him to step up in his second year. You know, he didn't play a ton last year, was battling some injuries, so praying for a healthy season for TJ Tampa so we can actually really see him out there and, you know, have him go through some game reps so he can get better at his game. You know, he has a lot of room to improve as well. He's just getting going. So I think our cornerback room, if healthy, is going to be plenty good enough that, you know, the if is a big deal because guys like Awuzie and TJ Tampa and Jalen Armour Davis have struggled with injuries recently. So if that continues, then our cornerback room gets pretty thin. But if everyone's healthy, I like where we stand. I think Awuzie can actually be a big piece, and I think TJ Tampa coming up into a rotation type role. Maybe TJ Tampa plays a similar role that Nate Wiggins did earlier in the season last year, where he was kind of rotating in, but was always fresh and was always kind of out there making plays. So I'm expecting big things from TJ Tampa this year. Heading over to the wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins was the talk of the week. He actually ran the fastest out there, which is pretty crazy. He posted this, by the way, said, "I'm old and can't run," and he basically tied for the fastest speed at practice. Marquise Robinson, an undrafted free agent corner, slightly got him at 20.2, and then Tez Walker was 20 even, and DeAndre Hopkins also 20 even. LaJohntay Wester right there at 19.9. Zay Flowers, Keaton Mitchell also on the board, Malachi Starks. But it is really impressive that DeAndre Hopkins is out there moving like that. You know, I think that that is a great sign, and I was listening to Ryan Mink on his podcast talk about DeAndre Hopkins, and he was very excited and said that he would be shocked if he doesn't have a really large role in this offense. He thinks he's going to go out there and make a ton of plays. Compared him to the Steve Smith signing. I've heard people compare it to the Anquan Bolden move, which I disagree with that one just a little bit. I understand the play style, but Anquan Bolden was like in his prime when we traded for him. I think the Steve Smith comparison could be a good comparison. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is going to be our wide receiver one. Steve Smith, when he was brought in, was instantly wide receiver one. I think that Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman are still very, very involved, but DeAndre Hopkins is going to have a huge role. And then you got your depth receivers like Tez Walker and LaJohntay Wester, who both were making noise this week at OTAs. I was seeing their names pop up consistently throughout the week from reporters and just the team talking highly about Tez Walker and LaJohntay Wester. I think that they definitely make this team where Ravens are going to probably carry 6 receivers. I know that 6th spot is open. I would say LaJohntay Wester is competing with guys like Anthony Miller, Dayton Wade, but if he's our punt returner, he's going to get that 6th spot. So then it's just a question of whether we have a 7th or not, because I think Tylan Wallace definitely makes the active roster as well. So the Ravens' depth receiving core is going to be pretty solid if guys like Tez Walker, LaJohntay Wester, Tylan Wallace are all there stepping up and making plays. Tez Walker and LaJohntay Wester really are wild cards. We really haven't seen a ton. We saw a flash from Tez Walker last year, but I think that he has a lot of potential if he continues to work on his game and build confidence with the coaches. I think he can get involved and really stretch the field for the Ravens this year. So I'm excited about the early signs of Tez Walker and LaJohntay Wester at OTAs this week. Lamar Jackson was an early standout. I don't think that comes as any surprise, but I definitely want to point that out. He shined at OTAs, was 10 for 11 on the open practice on Wednesday. Looks in shape. Was out there slinging the ball. John Harbaugh said he was in full control of the offense immediately. The fact that he's even there, that this many veterans are there this early in OTAs is just an incredible sign for how locked in they are this year. I think this is a very tight-knit team, a cohesive team that has a lot of chemistry. A lot of these guys have been together and have went through some of these close losses and, almost getting there, having a team that's good enough but not quite getting over the hump. I think that builds callous and resilience. And when you get there the next time, you can lock in a little bit differently because it's fresh in your mind the previous 2 years how you went out. So it's amazing to see this many important guys at OTAs this early, especially Lamar Jackson. We also saw Roquan Smith out there. He's lost some weight. I was reading through a report that he was keeping up stride for stride with Justice Hill in coverage, and Roquan is looking even faster than he was last year. I know a lot of people were getting on him a little bit last year for not moving as quick. It looked like he did thicken up a little bit. I think a lot of the struggles of Roquan last year was due to the guy next to him not doing their job and him having to think even more because he couldn't trust that, a Trenton Simpson's going to play his assignment well. He might have to go over and help, or he's just end up basically not playing his game because the guy next to him isn't doing the right thing. So hopefully we can get that locked down and get consistent play from the starter inside linebacker that's next to Roquan Smith. And I think you'll see Roquan Smith, unlocked and back into the traditional Roquan Smith that we've been seeing. And not that he had a bad year by any means last year, but I do agree that it did seem like a slight step down from that, just flying around with his head chopped off Roquan Smith that's just constantly around the football. Last year, I didn't see that as much, but it's really due to who he was playing with. He didn't have Patrick Queen there just going off, playing at an all-pro level as well. So I think if Trenton Simpson takes a leap and we get better play from the guy next to him, Roquan's going to end up being a lot better. Odafe Owe was another standout, not so much in OTAs because you can't really get the greatest look at pass rushers. There's no pads on. They can't have physical contact. So even if you look like you're about to get to the quarterback, you just never really know without pads on. But Odafe Owe put on 20 pounds of muscle and still says that he's moving the same way. So I think that is going to unlock a completely different version of Odafe Owe, a much more versatile version of Odafe Owe, and we could be looking at an all-pro type year for Odafe Owe in a contract year, which wouldn't be a surprise at all. I think this is going to be Odafe Owe's best season of his career, and the Ravens need it. They could use that juice in the pass rush room. Speaking of new juice in the pass rush room, Odafe Owe was also talking very highly of Mike Green. He called him the truth. And a lot of people were raving about the natural ability of Mike Green. Like I said, it's very hard to judge offensive lines, defensive lines, pass rush in OTAs. It's almost impossible. But the raw traits, the raw athleticism, the pass rush moves are already there for Mike Green. So when the pads do come on, I'm still expecting him to flash and shine along with the Dafe Owe. I think that the Ravens pass rush unit got a lot better, and I'm excited about these guys. A couple other standouts from this week. Malachi Starks thrusted into a very important role. He is running with the ones. He will be starting next to Kyle Hamilton. Harbaugh said that he hasn't made a mistake yet. He's obviously thinking a lot, but he is going to be a special player, man. And I'm excited to see his game grow over these next few months. I think Malachi Starks by preseason, by the regular season, is going to be a playmaker on this team. He's definitely going to hold that back end down, and I'm excited about us bringing in a star safety like that to be able to go next to Kyle Hamilton. Ben Cleveland was also a standout from this week, was getting some run with the ones, and there's a true left guard competition. Could be right guard too, but from my understanding, I think Fa'alele is going to start at right guard whenever he gets back to OTAs. But left guard, Ryan Mink wrote in his article, do not be surprised if Ben Cleveland wins the left guard position and he's out there getting an opportunity and looked good. It's definitely hard to judge the offensive line. Like I said, there's no pads on, but the fact that he's getting a chance to run with the ones does show that there's a true competition, and I think Ben Cleveland's got everything in the world to play for. You know, he's definitely underperformed a little bit when it comes to playing time. You know, he's a third-round pick. He expected, I'm sure, to be a starting guard at this point in his career. I'm sure the coaches expected him to be a starting guard at some point, you know, with his size, with his ability. We were very high on him coming out of college thinking he could be a starter within a year or two. Well, we're 4 years later, and he's still back up, but that's all right. He's getting a chance. He's got all the opportunity in the world, as does Voorhees. You know, I'm not writing off Voorhees or Cleveland. One of these guys is probably going to win the left guard job, and whoever it ends up being, I think, will play well for this team. I definitely think that the Ravens offensive line will be better than it was last year. But that's it for today, guys. Just wanted to come on here, give some updates, go through some OTA standouts. Let me know what you guys are thinking about everything. Appreciate you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll let the greatest linebacker in the history of the game take us out.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. The Flock Rundown. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.